Hello, my name is Thibs and I'm a film student at Symonds College. Here we have the great BAFTA award-winning director Peter Nicholson, who just came out with his new original British thriller Dartmoor Killing. Let's take a look.
Something really bad happened here.
It's too much of a coincidence, you and this place.
Time for a swim. Skinny dipping only.
What's going on?
Chris just started playing this game.
Come to my room after midnight. Don't say anything.
I remember.
So, Peter, welcome. It's nice to have you here.
Thank you.
So tell me, how did you transition from TV and short films to a full-length feature film?
Yeah, I've had 30 years of working in television, which has been a great journey, and I've travelled the world and I've really enjoyed a lot of the projects that I've worked on. But I've always loved independent cinema. And there came a point where I thought, you know, if you're going to try and make the step into independent films, you kind of got to step aside from television. You can't really do both because it's all consumable. Both are all consuming. And the real trigger was that I met the actor David Morrissey, and he'd made an independent film using a financing model that suddenly I thought, I can see what they've done there. That makes sense to me. They've not used the traditional model of financing a film through selling the rights to the film in advance to raise production money. They unhinged that traditional relationship and raised the money through private investors, and that made sense to me. And I was fortunate. They were very generous with their business model, and basically Paul Morrissey came on board as an exec producer, and we developed a business model along those lines.
So how has 30 years of television experience affected your filming style, would you say?
I think I'll always be in love with landscape. I mean, I grew up on the edge of Dartmoor, and my academic background before filming was as a geographer, so I've always loved the great outdoors, and even in my documentary sort of career, if I'm with a film crew and I see a mountain or a river or a coastline, you know, I take the crew straight there because there's always some amazing kind of atmospheric shots or abstract shots with water and light and texture, and you know, so I do love the British landscape tradition, and you know, I love films that are cinematic in that sense, and so there was always that ambition, you know, that when we made our first feature film, that I wanted to shoot that on Dartmoor because I knew how cinematic a stage that location could be.
Well, leading on to that, what inspired you really to use the cinematic landscape of the English more specifically for your horror genre as a backdrop for your film? And did you encounter any difficulties with the unpredictable British weather?
Yeah, well, yeah, I love Dartmoor, so it really was a no-brainer to try to stage a film there, and bringing, you know, high production value to the film at a low budgetary cost. I also like genre films and thrillers particularly. I mean, I grew up watching films like The Shining, Philip Noyce's Dead Calm. These are fantastic psychological thrillers with a small cast but very cinematic sort of locations. The ocean for Dead Calm, and then the Overlook Hotel up in the mountains in The Shining. I mean, I really wanted to bring, you know, a cinematic landscape to the film, because a lot of small budget films shoot in apartments or houses or what have you, and they might be great scripts, but they're not necessarily cinematic films. They might play better really for television. So it was an ambition to be as cinematic as possible with the film. And of course, you're right, it brings other challenges. Dartmoor, the weather can change, every 10 minutes, it has its own microclimate really. But we were very fortunate in the summer of 2014 when we filmed. It was a beautiful summer. Although we did still get changeable weather, and we had the ability to change certain days, and I was monitoring the weather all the time. I had a really good app called Weather Pro that I would recommend to any director or first assistant director that's planning a shoot, because it really does tell the weather by the hour. And, it's that accurate. So we did reschedule certain days, either to get maximum sunshine, for example, the picnic scene when the people had to swim, skinny dip in the river, or indeed when they were recaptured, in the forest, and we wanted that mood change where you don't see the sun again from that point where they're recaptured and the girls are locked up in the barn. So, it was, that was one challenge, the weather. The other challenge, is really, particularly with the climax of the film, the last 20 minutes take place at dusk, and we wanted there to be enough light and detail in it so that you could see the landscape. So it wasn't just obviously pitch black, otherwise might have just shot it in a black box studio. But it's a real challenge because the last scenes are big scenes. You've got the stunt where Susan gets hit by the car, you've got the chase up the hill up to the tour, and then you've got the final denouement and the final dialogue and the stabbing of Chris and the final dialogue between Chris and Becky. And those are big scenes, and they all take place in effectively that magic hour, sort of twilight, where you've got enough detail to see the silhouette shape of the landscape, and enough detail to see a little bit of the grain in the rocks and the green in the grass. But we had to split those scenes over several nights. So even the stunt scene was shot over 2 nights. The final scene up at the top of the tour was shot over 2 nights. We couldn't, because it's shooting in June, it doesn't get dark till 9:30, 10 o'clock, and then you've or 9:30. So we were really shooting in that magic hour period between sort of 9:15 and 10, 3/4 of an hour. Right. So you could get half the scene maybe done. On one night we got. So for example, the stunt scene where Susan gets hit by the car. We shot the dialogue one night and we shot the actual stunt the other night.
The weather was a challenge, but what would you say was the most difficult aspect of making Dartmoor Killing?
They're different challenges. From a filming point of view, what I've just described actually, that I've sort of answered that question in advance in a way. That was probably the biggest challenge, was splitting scenes in the final 20 minutes of the film, having to split those scenes across 4 or 5 nights, 5 or 6 nights even, to get those final 3 scenes. The other major challenge is really financing the film. And that's, you find the model, and thank you David and Paul Morrissey for introducing me to that kind of finance model, but it still took 2 years to raise the money. So that, the challenge. But we got there, and interestingly, there's a sort of momentum that happens once you get past once you get to within the last sort of 30, 40, 50,000 pounds of your budget that you're aiming at. The project gains real momentum because the investors can see that you're getting close and that you're going to hit the finishing line. And in the end, we actually were over-invested. It's interesting, but people get yes because they know the project's going to happen and they want in. And there's a confidence thing that kicked in. Now I've only done this once so far, so I don't know if that'll happen again. But it was an interesting thing. It's sort of slow. There's an initial sort of people that are really enthusiastic put in, and then there's a really tough middle period. But then when you get nearer to the finishing line, it speeds up again. Well, it seemed to be. That's what happened with us anyway.
Would you say it's difficult to market an indie film, especially a regional British film to a wider audience?
I think every stage of the process has its challenges. The finance raising, you know, the making of the film, the pre-production and production, you know, has its challenges, which we've talked about, you know, and then the final stage, and this really for any sort of emerging filmmaker, young filmmaker, it's so important to think about stage 3, the marketing and distribution of your film from the point you're even writing the script. Who is your film for? What is, you know, working out with advice, what is this, you know, the best route to market for your film. With us, early on, it's a regional film in the southwest. It's got a strong sense of place and regional identity. So those were cards that we knew the film had early on, that strengths that we should absolutely play to, and that excuse me, and that was reinforced by the relationship with Dartmoor Killing, with Film London. That was reinforced with the relationship with Film London, who encouraged us to think about the film from a regional release point of view in terms of the cinema strategy. And that every exhibitor that looked at the film said they'd take it, and it just kept growing, and we ended up with 33, 34 cinemas taking the film. So there was a point where it didn't make sense for us to put a middleman, a UK distributor, a theatrical distributor, in the middle of that process, because we've done deals direct with exhibitors. We would be, often these deals were 50-50 or 60-40 or 45-55 percentages of box office, so actually we'd get some income back, you know, from the theatrical release, which normally a theatrical release is completely a loss leader. You know, it's a necessary component, and it has the kudos, it allows you to get national press review, and also just as a filmmaker, you want your film to appear in cinemas. But it's more likely, particularly for small films, a loss leader, and where they make their money back eventually, if they do, is on the home entertainment, the volume DVD release, and then selling gradually internationally. A direct distribution route for us to release the film theatrically ourselves was the right thing to do, but we'd met Soda Pictures, who were interested in the film from a home entertainment point of view, and when the film's complete, they still liked it, they liked the script, and they liked the finished film, and they came in and they took the UK home ents rights. So that gave us, you know, us doing the theatrical, Soda doing the things we couldn't do, which is doing getting DVDs into a national chain like Asda and HMV, iTunes, etc., Amazon, Virgin Movies, etc., etc. So getting it on the main platforms, and then, you know, so that kind of pretty much tied up the UK, and then in the last 2-3 months, we've managed to secure a US distributor who have already pre-sold to Netflix, which is fantastic in the US.
Yeah, kind of as a more personal question, what do you feel about your first film? Do you feel it's a good, strong step into directing full time?
For a first film and for people stepping up from short films, I think the model that Dartmoor Killing employed is a good one, and if I was doing that again at that scale, I definitely would be, yeah. But I'd keep a bigger marketing budget for the film.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Peter, for coming.
My pleasure.
And I was wondering, do you have a message for film and media students who are looking to get ahead in the industry?
Well, I hope, yeah, I mean, coming today is, you know, really important to me, and to, you know, I want to encourage young filmmakers as much as possible. So, you know, I want to be as positive as possible. The journey is long, the journey is hard, and there are many things obstacles to overcome at every step, in terms of financing, then the actual challenges of the shoot, and then the challenges of getting your film out there. But you know, I can really sum it up in just sort of, I suppose, five key points, and I have mentioned some already. But is, you know, with that step up, right to scale, make it manageable. You know, don't you know, shoot a car chase, smashing up all the historic buildings of Winchester. You know, do shoot a chase through the woods, you know, with people rather than vehicles. You know, do keep the cast size down. Do think about second thing, do think about, being as cinematic as you can be in the landscapes that are available to you for no cost. So think about what's high production value and low cost of the budget. Thirdly, do think about your audience from the word go. Think about who your film is for. Is it for a teen market? Is it for couples? Is it for a female-led audience? We very quickly identified that Dartmoor Killing would appeal to female-led couples. Actually, sort of, it's not a teen movie. Even it's got young, fairly young actors in it, but not. It actually appeals to sort of 30s upwards, really, 30s to 55s, and particularly female-led. To try and identify who your audience is. Don't just say it's for everybody. Think really hard about who your film is for. And that relates to think about what your distribution channels would be. Is it if it's for a teen movie, maybe it's best just to make it for the net or the web. Think about scale. Think about where the kind of outlets that you want for your film. What's that then? And then 2 final points. Think about partners. When you're scaling up, think about partners on the journey, and that might be, an executive producer that's really wise and is giving you advice and has that strategic perspective, or a post-production partner that comes on board that's going to guarantee that you get the really good quality in your post-production, so they've got a vested interest. Or it might be a training partner like Film London, check their website out and see what training opportunities there are, for films, and they run various schemes. It might even be Microwave, which is a very low budget £100,000 scheme which they run each year for first-time features. Worth keeping tabs on those kind of sites. Film London have been a really helpful partner in the whole journey for Dartmoor Killing. So it's worth making relationships with those kind of organisations. And lastly, this is such an easy and obvious one, and it applies to short films as well, is digital assets. Again, at our scale, at the smaller end, your social media is going to be hugely important for your film, so just get great digital assets, behind the scenes, digital stills, little video interviews with your cast and crew, because it costs nothing. You just need one more person on your team when you're shooting or whatever, and do that on your short films, do it on your first bigger films, get the best digital assets that you can, because they will pay dividends.
All right, thank you very much for coming.
My pleasure.
Good luck on continuing
Thank you.
the kind of distribution and marketing of Dartmoor Killing. Check it out, it's on iTunes and VOD and
Amazon.
DVD as well.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming, and we'll see you probably around
With the next one.
Yeah.